three former Yankees who are performing terribly elsewhere in 2022. Apologies to Jackson Frazier, who just missed the list. His name was Clint on the Yankees. It is now Jackson Frazier. That's his middle name. That's what he'd like to be called. He's certainly struggling, but I don't like lumping him in with people who are struggling because it is very obvious that concussion issues have wrecked Jackson Frazier's career to this point. I am rooting for his comeback more than I'm rooting for Gary Sanchez's comeback. Is that weird to say? Probably. That's how I feel. But I focused in on these three. We published this today. These three former players who are performing terribly elsewhere this season. And I'm going to close it with a twist that's going to spark the end of our discussion here. Number one, of course, Tyler Wade, who everybody fell in love with because of his versatility last year. He had a 90 OPS plus last year in the season where you all convinced yourself he was kind of an integral part of this team. OPS 677, hit 268. It's fine in spurts. Basically, Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, but with less of a clutch gene. Now he's on the Angels and he's performing quite poorly. He has a 55 OPS plus this year and has been worth negative 0.5 WAR. He's halfway towards subtracting as much WAR as Cody Bellinger did from the Dodgers last year. Number two, remember Nick Nelson? Joe Girardi does because he used him all the time before he was fired from the Phillies. Nick Nelson has somehow racked up 33 and a third innings this year and has struck out 31 batters. That is typical Nick Nelson. That's what we remember. We were told he whiffs guys, he eats innings, and the stuff is just so nasty, and eventually it's going to translate. He's struck out more batters than innings pitched in his MLB career to this point. He's also subtracted 1.1 WAR overall, which is absurd for a spot starter reliever. Career 1.624 whip. So he's actually been better than his career average so far this year. He's at 1.470, 5.13 ERA, 3.46 FIP, and a 4.08 FIP last year with an 8.79 ERA. He's just a guy who underperforms that FIP regularly, and he's been a gas can more often than not for the terrible Phillies bullpen this year. Now, the third spot on the list goes to, drum roll please, Albert Abreu, who pitched for the Texas Rangers after being traded for Jose Trevino, struck out 9 and 8 2/3 innings, only allowed 3 earned runs, but walked 12, 3.12 ERA, 8.56 FIP, then went to the Kansas City Royals after being DFA'd, 4 1/3 innings, 2 earned, 4 more walks, 3 more Ks. FIP still sitting at 8.21 in the small sample size, 4.15 ERA. He might be one of the luckiest pitchers in baseball this year out of the bullpen. He's been in 2 cities already, so it feels weird calling him lucky, considering he's already lost 2 gigs this season. But he is certainly overperforming his peripherals, which are brutal. And all of this is to say the New York Yankees saw that and decided to take a chance on him again. Even though he is performing terribly on other teams, he is now a Yankee again, added to the active roster on Thursday, joining the team for the homestand, starting with the Houston Astros. They know him better than anyone else, but that resulted in Clark Schmidt being demoted. That resulted in Manny Banuelos facing potential DFA, even though he has been such a great story this year. They can't send him down without losing him potentially, and I don't really think you want to do that considering he has done the job and he's gotten to fulfill a dream. Does he get claimed by somebody else if the Yankees DFA him? He's much more likely to do so than Jackson Frazier, who cleared waivers a couple weeks ago after the Cubs DFA'd him. And now Abreu is on the roster, and David McKay, who also lost his 40-man spot in this shuffle, was traded back to the Rays, where he came from, for more cash considerations during this podcast. So he goes back to Tampa as the corresponding move. A whole lot of shuffling just to bring Albert Abreu back. Now, you and I talked people off the ledge earlier today. The bottom line is if he's terrible again, he'll leave again. They need to get rid of bullpen arms at some point. Loizaga comes back. Chapman comes back. Even Zach Britton thinks he's coming back. And you can demote Ron Marinaccio, but you can't really demote anyone else. You start losing Litke. You start losing Banuelos. Miguel Castro you might lose. They traded Justin Wilson in the middle of last year. Don't rule it out. But should Albert Abreu be on this big league roster right now? If it were up to me, he wouldn't be. But if he struggles for a 51-18 team, they will jettison him again, just as the Royals did and just as the Rangers did. He's the easiest cut on the roster automatically.
100%. And don't forget, the Yankees are playing the long game here. Clark Schmidt came up in 2020, was injured in 2021. He's thrown 44 and a third innings coming into the season over the last 2 years. That's nothing. He's a starting pitcher. He's supposed to be throwing a lot more than that.